What I'm to look at is in times like this, when I look down on myself, is that instead of doing what I attempted to do, like if I have accomplished other things, then it's understandable. It's because time changes, and your priorities change. And as long as you're not still and you're moving forward, then that's good. I mean, just because you plan to do 100 training sessions and you only did 10 doesn't necessarily mean that you haven't done anything during that period.
Not at all. Not at all. I understand that. Actually, I was talking about it with Shahab, the topic of being humble enough to put the bar as low as you can grab it. Because, but you can leave the bar anywhere high and you can never touch it.
Yes.
Okay, I asked it from two other badges. How are you doing, Shahab? How are you doing, Elmar? Sorry, I just called you Shahab for some reason.
How dare you?
Nice. I've been called worse.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Great start to the podcast.
That's a great way to
I
start.
feel like this is like the relationship between Brian Callen and who's that guy? The big guy.
Except
Who's on Joe Rogan.
Except the roles are
Anyway.
reversed.
Yeah,
It's all good, man.
Shahab, put the microphone a fist away from your face.
close enough, man.
Yeah, now it's good. I don't know
All right.
why
It depends on how strong I'm talking. I was talking softly like a pimp would do.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Okay, gentlemen.
This is not going to go
Thank
there.
you again for. It's gonna go very good. Just wait for it. Just wait for a minute. So let's do what we are about to do. The idea was to bring up a book. I know some of you, like Elmar, didn't even open a book this year, but
I'm
that would be
Very
great
ashamed of my.
to. Of course. How many? Like 69, 96? What is the number?
Probably 96. Definitely more than 80 because that was a previous record.
It's I think it's 96, right?
finished, yes.
Jesus Christ.
Jesus. And you still have a month to go.
on a motorbike.
The reason that I actually said let's talk about only one book was I knew Elmar cannot wrap it up in one podcast.
Yeah, I'm
Dude,
happy
you
to give my
haven't read-
spot to Elmar.
You haven't read enough books just for the four of us. You basically read for the entire team instead of the entire team. Jesus.
Well, thank you, sir.
96 Books.
This turned out that kind of a year.
But can I ask the title of the books from every and each of you? That a specific one that you're planning to talk. Mine is the very recent book that I read, and I really enjoyed it. That was a very interesting book. I wanted to say solid, but it's more of a theory, but theorized in a very great manner. The book is Stolen Focus by Johan Hari. And there are other books of him that they are well known. And I've never read any other book of him. I really enjoyed this one. It hooked me from the get-go at the beginning, like in the introduction. And that was interesting because the book generally is talking about how these days the attention-sucking tools and platforms that we are using are actually hooking us and grabbing our attention. But I was hooked by a theory again in a book at the beginning, which I will talk about it when I'm going to tell you about the book. But that was a very interesting book. What about you, Elmar? What is the book that you chose among many to talk about it tonight?
So, so what I've read this year can basically be divided into two categories. One is I really went all in reading sci-fi. So there were some books that I had read when I was a teenager, and I wanted to just refresh others that came up new. And I hadn't read a lot of fiction. So many of the books that I read this year are fiction, sci-fi, and perhaps that's why I'm able to rack up such numbers, because you read them very fast. And nonfiction is obviously a different ballgame. But if you ask me the way you ask the question that what are the books that you think we should all read and what would you recommend strongly, then I basically take all of that out of the list and look at only the nonfiction. And I was able to bring it
What
down.
percentage of it was fiction?
I don't know what percentage. I'll have to look at the numbers, but I'd say at least half, more than half, maybe 60%, maybe 70% even was sci-fi. But it's great. I mean, I have to tell you that reading sci-fi made me happier. It's a nice genre, you know. It's future. It's all kind of things that basically cannot happen today, but may happen in the future. Who knows? It's the kind of stories where you look at what humanity and human beings really are still, whether it's 500 years ahead or whatever, on a different planet or on different context. Just the creativity of the people who write in the genre, the ideas they come up with, fascinating stuff. And some of the books I read are from decades ago, and some of them came out this year or last year. So it just as a genre, fantastic. Coming back to the book that I would recommend, I brought it down to 8 titles. But then if I have to pick one among them, that would be a book called Awe by Dacher Keltner. Interestingly, this author, I read his book called On Tyranny. I think that was the title. And the interesting thing is that I didn't even realize that he would be writing anything about something like this. No, wait, it wasn't On Tyranny. On Tyranny was Timothy Snyder. Keltner's book was called The Power Paradox, how we gain and lose influence.
Power Paradox.
The Power Paradox. It's a very thin book, but a great book. And so when I saw this book, I remembered that one, and I thought, what is this for? This is the book, actually. The New Science of How Everyday Wonder, how it can, the new science of everyday wonder and how it can transform your life. Very interesting concept. What I liked about this is 2 things. It's, first of all, I mean, you know how it is. If I really enjoy a nonfiction book, then it becomes a book that I will write a separate article about. This is one of those books. It touches upon a lot of different things that we all 4 would automatically agree upon. But anyway, we'll discuss the book. But this is my choice for now. And then I can post on the the list of all the other books. I mean, there's a book by Cal Newport, Slow Productivity. It was great. There's a book by Václav Smil called How the World Really Works. That one and Ruchir Sharma's The Rise and Fall of Nations I thought were just fantastic overall educational books for kind of us, for the people who are curious about how things are. I really enjoyed Diamonds, Guns, Germs, and Steel, but there are a few things on and off about it. I enjoyed Robert Kaplan's The Revenge of Geography. Great book. And there was one book that was maybe not necessarily a great book in its totality, but it had 2-3 great ideas. It's Bill Perkins's Die with Zero. It's about finance management, personal finance management. And a couple of pieces of advice that I got from there, it's fantastic. I mean, I'll share if you want, but I would really thoroughly recommend to read that book. Finally, there's a book by somebody called Bjorn Lomborg. Now, Key and I had discussed this briefly. His book is called First Things First. It's just an updated version of an earlier book from 2014, if I'm not mistaken, which is called How to Spend $75 Billion to Make the World a Better Place, which came up in one of Jordan Peterson's conversations. He had mentioned it. So I picked it up and I read it. And then I was curious, is this research continuing? And then I found that there was the most updated version. And it's a great book for somebody like me, given the work that I do, just to understand how to make impact in areas such as education, development, migration, and so on and so forth. But we can talk about it. But all is really, I think it impressed me the most. So that's my choice.
Pretty amazing. Okay. Cannot wait to hear about it. Deborah, tell us.
You're
I'm
muted.
going back and forth between these two books that I've read last. One is The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, and the other is No Fear, No Death, No Death, No Fear by Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a very well-known priest.
What are the genres?
Well, they're both nonfiction, and they're both basically about how better living. The four agreements is a simplified version of all the general concepts of, let's say, like Stoic philosophy, and not Stoic philosophy in specific, but how to live a better life. You know, and Thich Nhat Hanh's book is actually more in depth. It basically focuses on what our main sources of fear is, which is based on fear of death, and how the concept of birth and death doesn't necessarily exist. It's a different perspective, and it's very interesting.
Amazing. Okay.
What is the book called?
No death, no fear.
No
by
Death,
Thich
No
Nhat Hanh.
Fear.
I was
So
gonna
which
read
one? Which one are you
Four
talking
Agreements.
about tonight? Which book are you going to talk about tonight?
I think I'm going to talk about that one.
Four Agreements, or
Yeah.
Oh,
The
right.
Four Agreements is actually very again, it's very simple, and it's nothing that we haven't talked about, and nothing that we won't talk about in general. But it's so to be very specific, it's basically be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. Right? The book generalizes these concepts and how to work through these. It's a nice, very simple read, but I think we can talk more about Thich Nhat Hanh's book. It's
Four
more
Agreements,
interesting.
right? What's it called?
The Four Agreements, yes.
I've seen the title before.
Don Miguel Ruiz.
I see.
So, last
ahead,
but
Sal.
not least.
Sure.
So, first of all, this year has been the least productive in terms of reading since the last 8 years. So since the surgery,
believe
so
you.
I started this year by really going deep into. I started this year because I learned about ADHD, so all my focus was on ADHD. Actually, my laptop password was related to ADHD.
Sorry for the interruption, but it's amazing because I'm going to touch upon it on one of the chapters of the book that I want to talk about. The chapter 13 is about ADHD. I did not know much about this, and I mean, my knowledge is as limited as to what I learned from this book and then just reading more from the knowledge from this book. But I want to hear definitely more about it from you.
Yeah. So I don't think I'm going to talk about that as a book, but let's have that in the discussion because we're going to have talk. So the first couple books were about ADHD, and that was very eye-opening. And it feels good to finally understand why something is the way it is, right? So because for the past couple of years, I was like, oh, why don't I have discipline? And we make a joke out of it between us, especially Elmar, this old fuck. But it's not like I don't have discipline, as shown in other areas of my life. I know. You're just ill-informed. So yeah, the ADHD thing was a concrete understanding of what you don't know is going on. So that was a sigh of relief for me, because if you can identify it, you can tackle it. Gotta say, so far it hasn't been going well. I haven't been very lucky in the realm, because one of the best ways to tackle it is with medication, and none of the medications I've tried have been really good, except one that they are not prescribing here. I can get it from Iran, but that also gives me physical side effects, which messes with my jiu-jitsu training. But more on that later. So, and then the death experience happened, and while I was in a hospital, I listened to novels, and I read some novels. So, like a third of the books I read are novels, which I enjoyed. And after that, because of the death experience, I dramatically changed my friendships and cut off some ties with friends and family. So I started looking for a relationship again. So because I was so deep into the red pill stuff, I said to myself, maybe I should soften it up a bit, right? So I started reading books that I have a less extreme approach about dating and relationships and stuff. So one of the books, which is not really just dating, that I'm going to talk about is Dr. Robert Glover's No More Mr. Nice Guy. I've heard Chris Williamson talk about it in his podcast with Ali Abdaal, because they're both nice guys. And I think at least 3 of us in this group, me, Elmar, and Devran, are nice guys, or were. Elmar definitely defeated that nice guy syndrome. But less for me and Devran, I guess. We are also on the way of defeating it. So that was a very good
how
book.
you just threw Kia
Definitely the
us
most.
there.
How politely he called me an asshole.
No, being a nice guy is definitely not a good thing. It's because being a nice guy is definitely not a good thing. I think Kia has the most default respect in this group. And that's
Because of
you're
being
not
an
a nice
asshole.
I mean, however you want to call it. But yeah, definitely not a nice guy.
He's not even denying it.
Definitely not. Definitely not a nice guy.
Yeah. But the book that I thought is the most useful for this group in general is a book I actually recommended 2 years ago when we had our Badgers meeting. Influenced by Robert Cialdini. I just finished it this year because I was halfway in and I had to stop reading it. That book has applications everywhere in life. So I think that's the best book I can recommend, and I don't think any of you have read it. So
No.
I think I'm going to talk about that.
Okay, amazing.
I have that in
would
my
be
to read
amazing.
list as well. I haven't gotten down to it. I'm definitely
I think
intrigued.
that book should be read every season, like every once every season.
Chris
just
Voss's
as a
book,
refresher.
Never Split the Difference, has had a major impact on my life. That is an amazing book, definitely. But I'm really interested about this influence one as well.
Yeah, Robert Cialdini's one is definitely more powerful than that because it talks about way more and way deeper.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's definitely my next read then.
Okay, amazing. Okay, very good. So, shall I start with my book and then we go ahead from there?
Please.
And the way that I'm going to do it is I try to keep it in the fringe of 20 minutes, but I'm going to be asking for your collaboration because there are ideas from the book that I actually want to talk about. The book is written, as I said, by he's a Scottish writer. Yeah, he has books apart from Stolen Focus, like Chasing the Scream. The book is about drug and addiction, and his very new book, Magic Pill, I think Shahab might be very interested in that, is about semi-glutide and the medications for type 2 diabetes. And that might be a very interesting read. I do not recommend going down reading the Wikipedia page about Harry. It's a very wild page. There are a lot of crazy stuff written about him there, which is understandable. Elmar, which book of him you read?
Lost Connections.
Lost Connections. Yes, that's another book of his.
I thought it, to be honest, I read it last year, and the book is about depression and the causes of depression and what is basically, what should, depending on what kind of connects with you as a potential cause for your version of depression, he recommends how to tackle each one of those things. In fact, after I read that book, I wrote one article about the kind of a two-pronged approach to depression prevention strategy almost. And I connected it to Stoicism and to Spartan kind of principles, but it's an excellent book that I would recommend to anybody who has issues with anxiety, depression, and things like that. So I think he's a good writer.
Right. What was it called? Lost Connections?
Lost Connections.
Okay.
By again, Johan
Johan
Herring, or
Herring.
who are we talking about right now?
Johan Herring is the same writer of the book that I'm talking.
Okay. Lost Connections.
Yes, but the book that I'm talking about is Stolen Focus. The reason of why we can't pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And the book was suggested to me by my wife. That's an amazing read, a very easy read, understandable. I really enjoyed it. And as I said, it hooked me from the very beginning, from the introduction. It starts by theories that they are amazing theories, by the theory of calling our current culture a attentional pathogenic culture. And we are actually working on destroying our own attention. And the questions that it started to ask is that if you were the controller of the world and you were planning to destroy the people under your control's attention, what would be the setup that you would setting up for them? And it most probably would be the same thing that we are living in it right now. And then the very thing that hooked me on the book was that people who can't focus are more prone to authoritarian, simplistic solutions. And he's talking about very long-term, huge problems that they need sustained long-term attention of generations to be solved collectively. And he talks about democracy. He considers democracy as one of those solutions that it cannot be achieved without long-term period attention by the generations. So that was very interesting to me, that's true. When you are attention deprived, you actually would rather the direction to be shown to you than searching for the direction, or you would rather just having the lowest fruit hanging to you at all time. That's what we are doing on social media all the time. We just grab it and put it in our mouth. That's how even we call it. We call it sound bites. We call it clickbait. It's so easy. So that was very interesting to me. And in the starting of the book, the writer decides to go off the grid and leave his connecting tools behind and stay away from them for a month and try to detox from them. That's a little bit cheesy for me, but I liked it. And the way that he puts it is interesting. Defining his emotions are very lovely.
Tell me about it a bit more. I'm interested in the detox phenomenon.
I mean,
The dopamine detox, right?
It's social media detox, generally. It's like he leaves his email, he leaves his phone behind. He just pick up a very old phone that cannot be connected to the internet. He goes to a city which does not have much business. People do not know him. And he tries to stay away to see what's going to happen to him. He tries to cut his ties with all of those day-to-day distractions. And one of the things that he brings up from his friends that I also posted in our group was that when you stop yourself from those distractions, it's when you start understanding why you were distracting yourself from the first place. So he never talks about it in the book. He does not bring up the topic of internal voices, what your head is going to do to you when you are disconnected from the distractions. How can you pull yourself together? It mainly talks about how you can reclaim your attention, but it doesn't say anything about when you have your attention back. Where do you want to spend your attention? How can the book is not about this. The book is only about reclaiming your attention and the reasons of why we lost our attention. So on chapter 1, he's talking about like how we are driving above our biological speed limit at all front. And I added to that while we are texting on our phones. So this was one of the ideas that I heard for the first time from Bert Weinstein, saying that we are like operating systems, that the software is constantly getting updated, but the hardware is still the very old school hardware. So from one point, they are not compatible anymore. And you start receiving these errors in the name of depression, stress, anxiety, and so on and so forth.
I think to add to that, Among Us this year, I felt that way closer because I was hospitalized for 10 days. And weirdly enough, there was a serenity that came from not having access to social media. I mean, I'm not going to say I was always in the moment because I was distracting myself with listening to audiobooks. Basically, The Count of Monte Cristo, I finished it in the hospital, which was still felt way better than watching social media. Especially what I realized is with social media is the context switch. It's not like if I watch a 2-hour-long video, which is all comedy and empty and whatever, empty pleasure, it doesn't hurt as much as watching 20 other videos that will account to 2 hours, but they're different topics. That really messes with your brain. So when I was in the hospital and I didn't have access to other stuff, and when I wasn't listening to the audiobook, a lot of ideas, business ideas, other ideas started just flooding my brain. And as a person who always tries to not be left alone with his own thoughts, that was an interesting experience. Because like I told you guys, that when my ebook reader was lost in Istanbul and I had to take a 1.5-hour metro ride back home without my reader, I was like going crazy because I was like, my brain doesn't shut up. But then when it was okay to just think and not stress about other stuff in the 10 days, it was a very different experience. Sorry to talk so much. Go ahead.
No. I honestly believe when it comes to math, to the topic of speed, at least to the topic of speed related to reading, I think you are the one among us who is clearly in another level. I know that you listen to books on 2x or 1.5, 1.2, 1.7x. And so many times I mean, maybe there might be a reason behind that, but I myself have been so much appreciative of slowing down most of the time, and when it's about reading. I mean, I'm a very slow reader, and I love talking about what I read, like paragraph by paragraph, even sometimes. Unfortunately, the person who's being constantly annoyed by this habit is my wife, because I constantly bring up a paragraph, go to her and say, just let me tell you this. And then I read it and I talk about what it but yes, so that speed issue is something real that all of us are living it.
About the speed, I got to say, it was very disruptive. The reason I was doing it was because I felt like I'm behind. So I used that as an opportunity to increase my range, to just read a lot, to hear a lot, so that I have more familiarity with the topics, so that when I really started to choose, I had already the width, and then I can go deep. Right now, I'm more about the depths. I read slowly and I listen slowly, because you basically don't retain anything. But just to be introduced to new ideas, it's good to listen on speed, because at the beginning, there's so many stuff that you don't know about. So it's good to just be, it's good to be hearing a lot, and then from those, you pick and then go deep.
I mean, one of the things that in the book, it talks about it says biologically and by nature, humans are designed to walk. We are not designed to have very high speed. And that's very true. And then look at us. We're flying, literally. I mean, in the book that I read many years ago, The Hunter-Gatherer's Guide for the 21st Century, it's basically talking about these things, like very, very small things happening to us these days. One of the things that truly grabbed my attention still, I think about it, was the concept of symmetry. Like everything, literally everything around us have perfect symmetry. Like our rooms, our cars, even right now, the iPad or phone in front of you, on the street, the lights, all of them. Like we are so far from asymmetry that we do not even know how it is a life would be like in an asymmetrical shape and form. Anyways, I don't want to go so far from that topic.
In a lot of books where the topic is, I mean, I finished one book last month. It's by Michael Easter called The Comfort Crisis. From that to anything that talks about calming your mind, anything that talks about distractions, anything that talks about productivity, essentially a lot of it does center around nature and spending time in the nature, and the exact thing that you just said, that it makes sense to spend time in an environment where the environment is fractal, which means it's asymmetric, which means it is uneven, which means it is more natural. We are supposed to be spending more time in that environment as opposed to very line and oval and circle and basically angular environment of cities. Now, we can't avoid life in the cities, let's be realistic. No one is going to live in a hut in a forest, but every time you can choose the walking path through a park or through any kind of nature there are studies that suggest that people's mental state improves, people's focus improves, people's productivity improves, people's self-esteem improves, and so on and so forth, after spending not more than 20-minute walk in nature 3 times a week. So that is enough to make that kind of an impact.
Very, very well said. And it also is mentioned in this book. In one chapter, it talks about mind wandering.
You find that some of these books that actually impress us most, you start finding repetitive themes in them. And, this year I see that a lot. Once you read a large volume of books, all of these common things start popping up. And even in my articles where I write about my monthly harvest, I sometimes mention that, okay, so I'm reading this book, it's on productivity, but some of the advice oddly corresponds to what Stoicism suggests. Or I'm reading this book about mental health, and then the advice matches something else that I read something. And then you kind of end up crystallizing your findings. But spending time in nature, I'll mention that too, is one of the things that comes up here as well. For sure.
Amazing. I'm going to get to that because it's briefly been touched by the writer on the 5th chapter of the book about, I don't know if you have heard of it, that was the first time for me hearing about it, the topic of the mind wandering. I didn't know about it.
Yes.
I didn't know about it, and you may think that it's something in contrast to attention, but actually is not, or in contrast to meditation, but it actually is not. So I will briefly also talk about it. But in the second chapter of the book, it brings up another phenomenon that these days we are experiencing, which is narcissism, and how specifically social media made us more narcissistic, and it's relating it to the issue of the attention, and it brings it up this way. It says narcissism is the corruption of attention. It is when your attention is turned in only on yourself and on your ego. that was very interesting to me.
Is it because of constant comparison to people's highlights?
Constant comparisons and the constant seeking of hearts and likes and going back. I mean,
I think it's the constant receiving of attention rather than comparison.
oh,
Very interesting.
that was interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Or seeking of it, right?
I mean, it comes with one and the other. I think completes the other. I mean, you have to seek it. I mean, first maybe you receive it and then you seek it more and more for more validation. You're like,
Like
this
easier.
got 100 likes. Oh, this got 500 likes. I mean, even myself, I catch myself every now and then, and it really doesn't do anything. I don't post those things. I say that to myself with my conscious mind. Like, I don't post those stories to receive likes or anything like that. But for some reason, I'm like, oh wow, like this story reached 500 people. I'm like, I'm having like an impact, or like people like look at these stories. Impressions, yeah. So
That's by design.
yeah.
I don't know who exactly was, I don't remember the name, but she went on TV and took out the phone and said, this is a slot machine. Because the design of the phones was in a way that exactly are the slot machines. You take it out and you don't know what you're going to get. How many impressions are you going to get? How many comments you're going to get? How many likes are you going to get? And that's why a team of like very high paid individuals who are very well versed in human psychology and the things that make us tick have invented those stuff to keep us hooked on this. And that's why I think a book like Influence is very important. Not because you want to influence people, but because you want to know how you are influenced yourself to not fall to the tricks.
Elmar, you want to say something?
I'm smiling because, again, another thing that is very similar to the concept here, from a bit of a different angle. The interpretation here is that, first of all, awe is a feeling you get when you realize that there is something that is bigger than you and that is a lot more impressive than you. And it is proven that it does reduce selfishness and narcissism. And the fact that we are deprived of awe more than usual in our lives is one of the contributing factors to the increase in being self-centered and narcissistic. Now, this is also in parallel with a Stoic exercise of the view from above, where, if you remember, in Meditations, Marcus Aurelius talks about this, Epictetus talks about this, that when you imagine how many kings and princes have lived and died, and how many thousands and millions of people have had lives, and when you remove yourself, remember my article on astrophysics, when you try to look at Earth from further and further, just to realize how insignificant our lives really are, dealing with this constantly can reduce the self-centered nature of the human beings. Now, we don't do all of that normally in our lives. I mean, people that are around us, you don't see them do that. And so what they end up, so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is covered in multiple books that we have collectively read, where basically the logic is this: people don't have enough hardship in their lives, and all of these narcissism, all of this self-centeredness, even depression, anxiety, comes partially from the fact that so if you are not confronted with true dangers and adversity, your brain reduces your threshold for what adversity and hardship is. So in the past, a tiger will eat me was adversity, my neighbor kill me was adversity. Now my boss will not like an email that I sent is now adversity. So the threshold has dropped, which creates stress out of situations that to people in less, fortunate countries will be ridiculous. You know what? You're stressed because your girlfriend didn't like the dress you wore, or because somebody posted some comment on your Instagram and you didn't like it. That's the source of your anxiety. And it will feel ridiculous to people who deal with life and death every day, for example, right? And I've experienced it working in a deep field location where I realized my threshold changed. Now we were more accepting some of the dangers that in a country like this, in a city, in a developed country, you'd be like, oh my God. But there you get used to it and you start kind of thinking in a bit of a different categories, right? And so the fact that there is no adversity, the fact that unlike four of us, for example, most people do not put themselves in designed modes of hardship through their life, because even jiu-jitsu training is just that. We choose to put ourselves in situations that are uncomfortable, that are physically and mentally challenging, that we have to overcome that adversity several times a week, that, my friends, has direct impact on how much narcissism a person experiences, because you then start feeling like my problem is the biggest problem, because you don't even stop to think about everybody else. You don't look about the bigger picture, whether it's nature, whether it's history, whether it's the universe, or whether it's just the kind of hardship that everybody else experiences. So another parallel between a good book that you've read and the good books that the rest of us are reading.
Very interesting. I mean, in the coming chapter, in chapter 3, the book is talking about sleep deprived, attention deprived. Of course, we do not need to touch more on this. All of us,
Matthew,
for years, been aware of it. Just exactly. We heard much more about this topic from Matt Walker. And just bring up some statistics that we sleep 20% less than our fathers 100 years ago. And children, like I have a 8-month-old daughter now, and children are sleeping on average 80 minutes less than children 100 years ago. It's a lot. And it's unbelievable. Like right now, I'm constantly reading books on brain development chapters, the activities. Sleep is the first one. There's no way that you can sleep deprive a baby and expect brain development.
Sleep deprivation is torture.
Unbelievable. Absolutely.
It's illegal in international law to torture people with sleep deprivation.
But then the book brings up another counter argument that most probably we owe human advancement to this level to sleep deprivation.
I've heard that argument too.
Yeah.
I mean, think about anyone you think is
actually on the chapter of diet.
It's like, think about anyone who has been wildly successful. How do you think they get 8-9 hours of sleep? Unlikely. But
no, don't bring it to the individual level though. Bring it to the species level. Like society.
Maybe we're just being
we are functioning. But we are collectively as human are functioning, and we owe to those so many people who they are sleep deprived and taking night shifts for whatever reason.
I don't think it's the cause and effect. Night shift doesn't necessarily mean you're sleep deprived. It means, it could be that you're not having the best kind of sleep, but it doesn't mean
you're deprived from that
deprived.
sort of sleep, which is recuperative and is going to help with your attention.
It's not necessarily. If you should remember, we talked about chronotypes, and that's exactly the reason that chronotypes exist, right? Because for the betterment of the tribe, it would make sense that some people would sleep late to take night shifts. And that,
but how many percent of those who they are working on the night shifts in their factories line are chosen based on their specific type of being capable?
I don't have data about that, but I would venture to guess that they're not chosen, but the people who like nights more would opt to go there. Then again, the bright lights that happen at night already fucks their sleep up anyway, because it's like, even if you have a different chronotype, at night you wouldn't have the bright lights, so your melatonin levels would have time to rise, etc., etc. But still, I don't think we have succeeded despite bad sleep habits, not because of the bad sleep habit.
The other topic that it brings up is the collapse of sustained reading, which also contributed to our attention deprivation, which I somehow can link it to the speed and pace, because a sustained reading requires a slow pace, and you need to pay attention. You need to spend time on it. You need to sit. And when I said sit, I just remember Elmar having his small book in the office, and while he was sitting in the toilet reading that book also. So, so you need to take a sit.
Really big shit.
So on the fifth chapter, it's talking about the topic of mind wandering to improve your attention. So mind wandering, I didn't know, is that when you let your mind to go wild and think. I mean, and it mostly comes when you go for a walk and you just leave.
Or you're stuck to a bed in the hospital.
Or
really helps.
Yes, most probably. So you allow your mind to wander, and it also helps a lot. That was a concept that I didn't know of. That was interesting. And then from sixth chapter onwards, it's starting talking about technology, which is somehow what I am really interested. How the business model of the social media companies and internet companies and platforms are designed in a way to be at odds with our interests. And it brings up this very interesting way of defining it on many fronts. Like, the business model of the social media companies is by grabbing your attention and selling it to the highest bidder. So, which is totally at odds with your interest, which is trying to keep your attention together and pay attention to what you want to pay attention to. But then in the next chapter after, it also talks about another topic that many programmers and designers and strategists roles in social media companies, and even us ourselves, put the responsibility on the users and saying that just turn off your phone, just turn off your notifications, just don't look at your phone. I mean, all of the things that they hook you can just get rid of them by turning your phone face down and not looking at them.
That is so similar to the advice, like, don't be sad.
Like, don't be sad.
Being sad is not good. I mean,
and then it brings up another concept that I didn't know, the concept of cruel positivism. So it's positivist because it provides a solution, but it's cruel to the way that the solution is so limited and it's like cannot even move a needle when it comes to solving that very problem that we are actually trying to solve.
Well, that's hiding behind logic, right? Because everybody wants to have the freedom to be able to do stuff. So they say, oh, okay, you're allowed to turn off these features in your phone. But then the same way the tobacco companies were saying, oh, these are not addictive substances. We're not doing anything to make them more addictive. And then it was found out that they were doing stuff to make them more addictive.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to smoke. But then all this millions of dollars and billions of dollars are poured into finding the way that these stuff can be addictive to you. And then you're challenged, hey, don't get addicted to it. You know, that's just false logic.
Look, there is a whole literature. Sorry. There's a whole literature. I mean, the most obvious choice for me is digital minimalism. If you start with Cal Newport's digital minimalism, it goes precisely through how it affects the brain and makes it addictive. But that's not the only one. You have a book by Jonathan Haidt that came out, I think, early this year or last year. It's called The Anxious Generation, which examines how anxiety and mental health issues have risen directly in connection with increased screen time, social media use. I mean, he talks about parenting as well, how helicopter parenting has affected things, etc. But there is a book called The Shallows by Nicholas Carr, talking about how internet has made our brain more shallow. You had recommended a book, Irresistible, was it, by Adam Alter?
You talked about it.
So there's that.
Yes.
There is the book by Tim Wu called Attention Merchants. He goes a lot more into technical detail as well in terms of how companies do what they do. And then there is the recent book I mentioned at the beginning by Cal Newport called Slow Productivity, where he literally just tells you how you need to slow down, how you need to get all of this crap out of your life as much as possible. Because, I mean, at least as long as you want to, implement a project that you really means to you and you attach a lot of value to it, you need to get the distractions out of the way. Or if you're using it for a practical, particular use, which is promote your business or reach your clients or whatever. So there has to be a means to an end. Because look at all these, we've seen articles about this from Jeff Bezos to Zuckerberg to everybody high up in these high-tech companies are not letting their own children access these tools. Australia, by the way, just introduced a bill to the parliament. It's being discussed on banning social media use for children under 16. So it's no accident that this is happening. As I'm concerned, ban it for everybody forever. You know what I'm saying? I don't need social media to make friends. In any case, most of the friends I've made that are worth having around are the people I've met face to face, never on social media. So all of that illusion that it will connect people more, now people are starting to realize all of the side effects and all of the negative impact. Not to mention that, we can go into politics too, but all the impact it's having on polarization and how the societies are split. And now extreme versus extreme is the public discourse versus more moderate versus moderate, how it should be. And it's not just America. Look at Turkey. Every country is experiencing something along those lines. And it's on every topic. If it's climate change, if it's gender issues, if it's war in Gaza or Ukraine or whatever, you have like a absolutely pro and against camps. And all the social media does is corral us into one camp or another. You don't even get to communicate with people on the other side because the algorithms have taken full control of what we are supposed to be seeing. Just because Shahab watches a video, the next day the same freaking video is recommended to me. I'm like, why are you assuming that I will see what Shahab is seeing? Most of the time, I don't.
Yeah.
You click on it, Elmar.
I do.
I know what's good for you.
There are actually two books that mentioned in this book also with regards to problems, like great systematic problems with naive, cruel positivist solutions written. Nir Eyal, I don't know if you are like the writer of the book Hooked, and
I know
at the same time the writer of the books Indistractable. So in one book he reveals all the tricks that social media company are using. He himself is also in this business. All tricks that they are using to get us hooked. And then in the other one, I never read any of those two books. I just started the Hook. In the other one, as Johan Hari is putting it, he is providing the cruel positivist solution by saying that just say fuck. I'm not going to use it. Just stop it.
Good luck.
But there is a book about it. So he wrote the book Indistractable, and I'm interested to read that book also. But when it comes to
it's never going to work.
Algorithms,
the problem with just stop approach is that it counts on your character and personality to be able to implement something like that. And as we know from decades long, fight against addiction to alcohol, cigarettes, or drugs, just saying, just stop. You could do it. That's not your physiology. Your body is designed to crave and crave more and crave more and crave more. And to break that cycle, who knows? I've never smoked or enjoyed alcohol. Could be genetic. Could be because I never tried. I'm saying it, and I may sometimes
not starting is always easier than stop.
But I can present it as a kind of a heroic achievement of my amazing personality. But the truth is that it could just be completely dumb luck.
Just be luck.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
luck.
Yes. And as
not
Elmar
difficult.
said, it never works because an army of game theory, game psychologies, and social media psychology and marketing psychologists are sitting on the other end
Yes.
to
It is a
Package.
losing proposition.
use
We
your
have no
short
chance.
handle on
Yeah, we have no chance.
exactly.
I mean, think
I mean,
about it.
they-
We
they-
all read Outlive, right?
Yes.
Did we all read Outlive? Basically,
There's another
Yes.
very interesting factor about this actually.
Yeah,
So
let me just say
like
this
we're
thing.
talking about how these
sorry, if you see all of the medical advice from the last 50, 60 years, when the medical science went into overdrive and has achieved all the amazing things, the one piece of advice that is guaranteed to extend your life the longest, to have the most impact on your health is do not smoke. It is proven in gazillions of studies, and it's not even the tobacco companies are putting it on the label saying it is killing you. And
Yeah.
yet, you have millions of people still smoking. Sorry, Devan. Like, it's just something this obvious.
no, the thing it's difficult to fight against these companies because they obviously have and they're constantly inventing new strategies to attract our attention. But now there's a different topic to it because the majority of people are so used to using this. It's aside from becoming a habit for all of us, it's also being against the herd, right? So there's a lot of psychological
Social,
factors that goes into it.
There's a
It's
social
not
pressure.
just your only willpower as an individual, but it's also like, oh man, like I'm different. You know, I'm not like even your peers, like at a certain age, at our age, I mean, it's not that for most people, it's still important at our age, but think about like the teenagers, like the college students, like people in their 20s, when they're just forming their character and starting to, just jump into life, and everyone around them, they're like on social media, and you just come up with them like to them like a black sheep, and you're saying like, I don't use social media. That takes guts. That's not that easy to do. And as all of us read the Atomic Habits, James Clear, right? It's breaking the habit. You can only not do it, like, oh, just don't do it, like. But it's a habit. We've all started doing it. Like, when you start to do it, it's much harder to just stop doing it. It's one thing to not start, but after you've started, then willpower takes in place, and again, then individual and collective psychology also plays a big role in that, and it's very hard to go against the herd. I find that's the most difficult thing, actually.
It's not just going against the herd. It's like we're social beings is very important, right? But then a lot of life is integrated into social media. So, for example, I had deleted my Instagram and I felt really happy about it, right? Until I got my brown belt, and I have to announce it that I have a brown belt. So I reinstalled it, posted, liked the interaction that I got, probably because it pushes it more because I have posted in a long time for the first time. And then, how long has it been? 2 months? I haven't deleted it, and I don't like it, Actually, I developed this habit of going and opening my messages and not watching the reels that I'm being sent. That's less stressful because I used to like watch everything. That was a lot. Now I'm just closing it most of the time, and it's still stressful. But the best thing to do would be to delete it and just leave it there. But then a lot of life is integrated into it. Sales is integrated into it. If you want to do business, is integrated into it. So I was actually thinking about it, like, when I'm going to make the new YouTube channel, I should make a completely new channel and not follow anything else than Jiu-Jitsu, so that my feed only has Jiu-Jitsu, so I can only see stuff about Jiu-Jitsu.
That's very interesting. But in the book, just for a second, Elmar, in the book, if you read it, it talks about how Google and YouTube algorithms is designed in a way. 70% of the videos that you see on YouTube, if each person sees on YouTube, are up next videos. That they are the videos that you do not choose. You did not choose to watch them. YouTube offers them to you to watch them. 70% of what you watch actually is up next videos.
Wow.
So it's unbelievable. And there is something else. The
I
algorithm is
disagree. That's an
designed.
average of the mortals. I watch what I want to watch.
The algorithm is designed in a way because negative content and conspiracy is the most viewed content, that by constantly watching the same topic and following the up next, it's highly likely that after 5 videos, you end up to a video which is about conspiracy or either negative of the same topic that you started from.
That's a pretty interesting statistic, actually.
That's very, very weird. And there are days.
I don't think
after
That's
days.
human nature.
No, exactly. I don't think it's designed to specifically guide you towards that. I think the point is, again, the algorithm functions in a way to keep your attention on the tool. They don't care what the algorithm produces, but it ends up producing negative and it ends up producing conspiracy theories because those are the kind of things that seem to catch people's attention. It's as simple as that.
That's very true.
I think this is actually, let me cut you off for a split second. So what you're talking about right now is directly linked to what we were just talking about. So the human psychology works in a way that when you make a decision and when you tend to do like a repetitive, when you live through a repetitive life, right? You have habits, etc. You're tending, like, it's a confirmation bias, right? You look for confirmations that give you approval of your decisions. And it's in the same way, like you search for people who think alike, who look alike, who dress alike, who live alike, so that you're approved and confirmed that your way of life is correct and you're a proper human being. Now here, possibly, that psychology might be working in this algorithm, like, because I'm thinking like 5 or 6 videos on a topic that I'm looking at, I start to believe whatever it is I'm watching is true or proper. Yes, for example, right? And then a video pops up that contradicts whatever I'm believing and whatever I'm watching, and I'm bound to look at it. I actually caught myself very recently watching a 20-minute long video, which I never do on YouTube. Just the topic was how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is fake and why I wasted my entire life training it. I watched it to the end of the video, just all of it, right? I'm like, this guy, how is this guy saying this stuff, right? And he's a black belt, etc., etc. And then at the last second, he says April Fools. And I look at the video, it is published on May 1st, Tucker.
Damn.
And I was like, duh. You know, like, it's amazing. I've given 13 years of my life to this, and like, I have no doubt in my heart that what I do is of my choosing, and you know, it's proper. I'm creating value, and Jiu-Jitsu is real, etc. But I wanted to watch the video. It's very interesting.
But you know, let me ask
doesn't
you a question. So since we're in agreement that the YouTube, the Instagram, the algorithms, it clearly, they have an insidious aspects to it. They clearly have a negative impact on people's lives. We have all felt it. We're all making conscious decisions to limit our exposure to these tools and algorithms and whatnot. Now, if I'm creating a business tomorrow, or Shahab is opening a YouTube channel, and then we're tapping into the same algorithms to attract other people's attention so we can benefit from it, how ethical do you think that is?
I have an answer to that. Depends on the content that you're creating, right? Because YouTube can be a very good platform for actually educational stuff, right? But if you're just creating stuff to distract people, that's a different ethical topic. You can make an argument that comedy is good, and it is good sometimes. But then there are people, they're attention grabbing stuff like Jake Paul, right? I don't think there is any ethics in it. It's just attention grabbing because you know it. You've hacked the system. You know people are gonna want to see this conflict, and you know you can make money out of it. So you're not really trying to create value, but you're using the bug in the system, you know, But the system works. It's like capitalism. One of the best points Ben Shapiro made about capitalism was an argument about, hey, look at these hedge fund managers. They abuse the system and they make money without creating any value. And the idea was that capitalism rewards people who make value. And his response was, that is very true, and that is one of the bugs in the system. I don't know how to fix it, but that doesn't make the whole system not valuable. The same way, if tomorrow I make a YouTube channel, I will want it to be very attention grabbing, as with any other business. We talk about this with Devron and Kia a lot. This is Alex Hormozi saying, as a salesperson, you are doing a virtuous thing by learning to persuade people to buy your product. Because if you really believe that your product works and helps their quality of life, it is your duty to persuade them against their worst judgment of laziness and inertia not to make the correct decision. So you're helping them make the right decision and gain value from the valuable product that you've created. So there's that.
Very solid answer, Elmar.
I don't know. It feels.
I don't know if you were expecting that coming.
No, I mean, it is a good answer. It still does have a bit of a tinge of manipulation on top of it, because you're essentially twisting. You're saying that if the system, so we agree that the system is overwhelmingly negative, and yet we use the system to create positive value, and that all it does is perpetuates the entirety of the system. So Shahab's argument is correct in the sense that since we all know the system is not just going to shut itself down, we might as well use it, or everything that it has to offer, to potentially put people on a positive path, right? But we have to also admit that even when we promote a positive product or a positive activity or a practice or habit or whatever, we're still basically multiplying what this system is and how it affects people's attention and how it manipulates it. You know what I'm saying? Maybe for a good cause, but still. So I don't think it's going anywhere, so I'm perfectly happy with that answer. But I think essentially what we're doing is we are tapping into the same manipulation tool that exists out there. We just tell the story of what the product that we sell is a good product, which is why we are comfortable doing that through this manipulative tool.
Yeah, it depends on if you call it persuasion or manipulation. Manipulation has a negative connotation to it in a sense that you are manipulating people because you do not believe that you're doing the right thing. So you're manipulating them to get them to do what you want with malintent. With persuasion, you're not doing that.
No, I mean, you can. I'm perfectly happy with the phrase, I manipulated the person to quit this bad habit because it's best. It's I think what's best for them. So, you know, you convincing is a way of manipulating as well, unless the person is fully capable of understanding your argument and then changing their position as a result. But if you're still guiding them somehow by pointing them to the right tools and so on, I mean, it's words. It doesn't matter. The point is the same, and we're not in disagreement.
The very next one is the concept of hypervigilance that I heard from the writer for the first time also. So I'm going to read a very short part from the book to you, and I really like this. To pay attention in the normal way, you need to feel safe and let yourself sink down in one secure topic. The child psychologist John Giordani says, narrowing your focus is a really good thing in a safe environment that helps you to learn things. But if you are in a dangerous environment, selective attention, where you are focused on only one thing, is a dumb strategy that can actually take your life. What you need instead is a very spread vigilance around your environment, looking for every and each cue for danger. How stress and fear, including insecurity, including financial insecurity, cause lack of attention and hypervigilance in our life is unbelievable. The theory is that in the late 1990s, internet came to us in a world where Middle classes started crumbling, financial insecurity wasn't rising, and we were sleeping 1 hour less from people in 1945. A more stressed society would be less able to resist this direction.
Makes total sense.
And it's unbelievable. I mean, look, we are all four grown-up men, and I can confess that I have never felt myself this stressed
Agree.
throughout my life. And it's not like that I'm in a bad situation, but just the stress is always out there. All sorts of insecurities, not in an emotional sense, but you're always stressed. And there are many other stuff that they bring this stress in front of you, like constant read of unnecessary news about other parts of the world that they are 100% negative and stressful news. I mean, you barely find anything on your news feed about what's going on right now in Finland and how people are spending their times in Swiss Alps. Nothing comes about this to you. But you just open your phone and see something about war.
So let me ask you something.
And this is just...
Sorry, no.
Sure.
Go on.
Go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
And this is just by the time that we have less war and less crime and less of all negative action. Just we have less of all of those, but we have more of them in front of us, in front of our eyes.
As
2 points
written by Steven Pinker.
First, let me tell you this. I was reading a study about, because this talking point that things are awesome and people should complain less and this and so on and so forth has been a strong talking point from Steven Pinker, Jordan Peterson, a bunch of other authors that focus on the environment aspect of things, on the politics, war, famine, etc., etc. The thing is, there's an argument that that's not entirely correct. If you analyze just the occurrence of conflict from not even that far, from let's say 3-4 years ago to now, the map of continued conflict has expanded. It hasn't shrunk. If you look at the refugee numbers in absolute terms, obviously not in relative terms, today versus 10 years ago, the number has definitely increased. Now, part of the argument, of course, our expectations of what life should be like has changed. But the truth is, I think it's a bit of a simplistic. And by the way, I've made that same argument for years that we're living in a great time. But it strikes me that in the last few years, the argument is getting a little bit simplistic. We might be at a bit of a high kind of tide type of a time right now. I don't know if there's one thing or many things that are causing it, but I am becoming more and more cautious in saying that things are great now. Now, don't get me wrong. On many things are great. We're not experiencing famine nearly as much as we used to. Disease is a bit of a different conversation. Lifespan has expanded, so obviously things are affecting things like that. The environment, argument back and forth. Let's leave that conversation for experts. But specifically on war and displacement, which happens to be our area of expertise that we constantly deal with, that in the last few years does not seem to be the case anymore. Now, 2005 to 2015 may have been truly a more quiet time, globally speaking, relative to what was before. But the last few years, I'm not so sure. So I think we need to qualify that a little bit, that on many things, life is certainly better. And I definitely don't understand when some depressed young men who, I don't know, maybe they don't have an attention of somebody up close. They're seeking this kind of an attention. They're upset about their place in the society. So they're fantasizing that they would much rather live in medieval times, not understanding that they wouldn't be, some knight on a horse, but probably somebody who gets killed at the age of 15 for no reason whatsoever or dies of disease. So I'm not even talking about all of that. All of that is, for me, very obvious. We obviously live in a much more secure time overall compared to before. But if you're comparing to like medieval ages, no argument there. But if you're talking just a few years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that is a conversation where we might need to use Eddie Bravo's phrase, we might need to look into it.
I find myself inclined to agree with you, because I've been thinking about the same thing, and I was in the field of, the better angels of our times, right? Everything is better, quality of life is better, etc. But then I also find myself doubting that, because like, okay, check out what you could buy with a decent salary back then and now. So I find myself, for example, comparing myself to my dad when he started working. He was around my age, like slightly younger, and he started from scratch, right? And then in 2 years he could make a house. He could build a house. But like right now, that's not really possible. Even if you are working in an elite organization, etc., just because of the sheer number of people that's there, and the resources have remained fairly stable, but the number of people have increased. So the distribution of wealth problem always exists. So and happiness and fulfillment, etc., being comparative, I can't really make sense of it in my own mind, that what is happening. Is it really a better life, or is it not a better life? Because like, I am eating better than a king was 200 years ago every day. Sure. But then it's comparative, you know?
Kia, let me ask you this. Now, you did mention what John Hari found problematic and the symptoms of the disease and why all these problems exist. Does he say in that book, what is it that we should do instead? What is there like recommendations for action other than just stop being on social media?
Look, in the very last chapter of the book, in the conclusion, the writer comes up with his own six steps that he started taking to change the habits. And he's not saying that this is a self-help book. He says, if it was a self-help book, I could tell you that I used this and it worked, and now you should use it too. But I myself am still challenged by the issue of attention deprivation. And I cannot tell you that I have solved that issue for myself. So these are the things that I do. That one of them, which is very funny, is that he bought a key locker for his phone, and he puts his phone in the key locker and put a timer on the locker for like an hour and 20 minutes. Like, and he cannot open it until he, like, I don't know, he's a writer, he's writing. So he has his own, let's say, innovative ways of tackling this problem. But no, he does not provide any. So
isn't it crazy how everybody ends up with the same solution in any era? I think it was Victor Hugo who would pay his attendant to lock him in a room until he would hand in a certain amount of sheets from under the door, until he would be allowed out. Because there were distractions for Victor Hugo too, obviously less than today. But it seems to me that the solution is some sort of forced discipline that you can't do otherwise, right? Because discipline will take you, so far.
Look,
but one of the things that actually, sorry, Alman, please.
No. I was going to say that if you're looking for solutions, then I think this is something that you should read.
We're going to get there. I just want to wrap it up quick, but one of the things that he talks about is that you cannot solve systematic problems with non-systematic solutions. So you need to have a collective at the societal level solution for this.
Yeah, but for this,
one of the things that he brings up,
you need a situation where the damage is overwhelmingly clear and is affecting more people than it's not. Whereas today we
but the story is,
yeah. Go on.
but I don't know if we can understand the depth. Like I believe
yet.
COVID-19
Not yet.
was the damage, but we cannot relate it to this easily.
Not yet, but people are already pointing out things like shutting kids out of education was bad. It takes time before people really break it down and analyze the impact of things. And I think with social media, we're starting to see that. With internet, we're starting to see that. But it is still going to take some time before people are like, this is clearly a problem or that is clearly a problem. And I don't know. I mean, again, like we mentioned several times, we know that about tobacco and alcohol. And they didn't disappear from our lives. Even if you shut down social media for 16-year-olds, what about 18-year-olds? Do you think they're doing any better? Or what about 25 and 30-year-olds? Well, I know people who are 50 who are stuck to their phones and they don't know what to do. I mean, my mother is a university-educated professional mathematician, right? She's a mathematics expert, and then suddenly she will tell me, you know what? I heard that this medicine is da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, where'd you hear that from? She's like, Facebook. And I'm like, what are you doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's people with education, people who have a sound judgment, and still she sees one article, then she sees, as you said, 4 or 5 that are recommended to her on the same subject, recommending the same thing. And whether you like it or not, what Devran said, the confirmation bias kicks in. Bam, now she's going to go around and recommend this to other people. It's the same on healthcare, same about politics, the same about what we should or shouldn't eat, what we should or shouldn't do. And it's a problem.
Yeah, and the solution, if you want to think about and talk about it, is given by Jonathan Haidt in his book, The Anxious Generation. But with all respect and love and interest that I have in Jonathan Haidt and his work, I don't believe that that's a solution. You cannot keep children until 16 years of age away from screens. That's impossible. I mean, you need a huge collective force. You need a law behind it.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I was talking with my
you
wife.
need a culture behind it, not a law behind it. That's what he's trying to push. If you make it a
But
culture,
it's not like that. It's impossible. We are united on very stupid topics globally, like working hours. Like, there is not a single topic around the world that we are united about. But in some ways, everywhere around the world, we do 9 to 5. So it's not like that it's impossible. But does that need another industrial revolution in some form? Maybe. I don't know. The chapter that I was very interested to talk about it with Shahab is a chapter about ADHD in this book. I'm just going to briefly mention it, and then when Shahab is going to talk about his book, he's going to talk about ADHD. But the way that he puts it in this book and the people who he talk about it is very interesting. And he starts talking about ADHD in animals. And it was very interesting to me that some of the people believe that ADHD is just the result of the nurture, but some of the people believe that it's genetics, and some of the people believe that it's just doesn't exist. There's nothing such as ADHD out there. But then he goes and talks to many scientists, doctors, and in one case, he's talking about the experience that he had with the animals in the zoo, and one specific situation with horses that they are diagnosed by ADHD. And the doctor explains this in a way that this is not ADHD. And he says, horses are suffering from frustrated biological objectives. And that's why they're behaving the way that they are behaving, like biting the metal in their mouth and pulling it to the level that their teeth would fall off. So frustrated biological objectives. That's a very interesting terminology. And I don't know if Shahab knows about it or read about it. But I read more in this chapter, and apparently what is have done with regards to ADHD is the attempt to change the chemistry of brain to change the behavior. And I don't know much about it. The book is not talking very much about it, although he spent a lot of time, but it's just in one chapter. And then he finishes it with one good analogy when it comes to how it can be genetics and also because of the surroundings. He said the best defining analogy about the genes and ADHD would be the analogy of cold virus in kids. If your kid is tired and run down, she might be more susceptible to cold virus during winter at school. But if there was no cold virus, neither your child nor that who was not tired or run down would catch cold. Similarly, your genes might make you more vulnerable to trigger in the environment, but there still has to be a trigger
Exactly.
to cause
That's epigenetics. So it's very well known that you know about correlation and causation, and then the what was it called, the p-value? What was it, the p-value? So ADHD has a very high one. I think about like 75%. If your parents have it, two parents have it, you get it. But then again, it's dormant. So stress in the childhood, lack of oxygen at birth, and many other factors can affect it, right? So first of all, I'm going to just give a thought process, not an answer or a solution or anything. Just because I lack information, and I mean it's way deeper of a rabbit hole than I thought. So I think of everything using evolutionary thinking, right? So I think evolutionary thinking, ADHD must have served a purpose to exist. So it's adaptive, just the same way that psychopathy is adaptive, right? We always have around 1% psychopaths because they're useful for the population. Because if we have to make the hard decision of nuking people or doing what Vlad the Impaler did to save his people, the psychopath is going to make the hard decision, and the normal people are not going to make the decision. So it's an adaptive thing. That's why the genes have not died out and they've been passed forward. So an ADHD person, they have so little dopamine that they need a real passion to work, right? So they end up being very adaptive in a way that they will find new stuff. They will look for the weird thing that tickles their interest. The thing you said about the animals really makes sense, because the biological frustration for an ADHD human would be getting stuck in an office, right? I've been thinking about my depression and sadness, etc. And it doesn't make sense, because like I'm making the most money, I'm doing the least work since I've been in UNHCR, and I'm the most depressed. And I go back to the first days that we started, both me and you as interpreters. Those were 8-hour days of 8 hours of work. Really tiring, really challenging mentally, but I was fine. So I, as a person with ADHD, would rather be tired than bored. And I understand that the free time that I have, I could fill it with other things, and Elmore does that perfectly. And I haven't managed to do the same thing. But that's the physiological frustration that an ADHD person will have.
I haven't
Now, another
cured
thing that I will say
my
about that is
ADHD. I've embraced it.
exactly. There's no cure. You just position yourself better. So it doesn't make sense. Like I was thinking the same way, because me and you have some similarities, Elmar. And I was thinking, okay, when Elmar started UNHCR, he really got himself interested in the Afghan situation. He went to the libraries and really read and became an expert on that subject. So that was an interesting endeavor. And he really positioned himself as an expert. So it was a fun thing to do for him, right? with me, the thinking was always I'm gonna get out. So I never allowed myself to do it, because another thing as an ADHD person, you don't want to do things that are not efficient. So efficiency, even if it costs a lot of long-term work, is something that tickles the ADHD mind. I'll give you an example from a game that I play. It's called Warcraft 3. So there's a hero called Pit Lord, and it has an attribute called Cleaving Attack. Right? I don't want to really complicate it, but basically, when it hits, it does 90% of its basic hit damage to an area of effect of other people. So if there's 8 targets there, all 8 people will get the same damage. So it really increases the damage per second of that hero. And then there's another hero that does singular damage and has critical strike. So one attack that it does triple damage to a single target, right? I'm saying that just to make a mathematical understanding here. So if you make mathematical understanding of this, the critical strike will, on average, give you around 70% increased damage. The cleaving attack can give you much more damage, but in a realistic situation, it doesn't give you that much, because realistically, you wouldn't be hitting 8 targets. But for me, I find myself really wanting to maximize the cleaving attack, because like the potential is there for me. So it's like, if it happens, if it works, it's going to be very well worth it. So I'm thinking about the efficiency. So because of that, in UNHCR, I was like,
happen,
okay, since I'm not going to dedicate.
But is it likely? Is it a high percentage situation where you might use it and it will be useful, or is it not? Or not?
It could happen if the opponent is just idle and not doing anything, but the opponent will not allow you to hit more than 3 targets. It's going to play around it. So, on average, you would be better off with the critical strike rather than the cleaving attack, because the opponent is going to work around it, and the opponent can go for air units instead of ground units, and you can't cleave air units. So there's that too. But it's like the prospect of being able to do much more with so little is very tickling, right? So that's the gambling side of an ADHD person. It's like going all in with the 10% odds, but you're like, if I win, I'm gonna make this much. Betting on weird odds because the payout is so much higher, although it doesn't make sense. So knowing that as a feature in my brain, I have forced myself to take the mathematical approach, because I know that my machinery will force me to make the mathematically incorrect decision. So, for example, I was playing a board game with Kevin Kia, and it was a horse racing game, right? And it had odds based on the dice that you would throw. So 7 obviously had the lowest odds because you roll 7 most out of any other dice. And the others, like 11, would have a very high payouts because, you don't roll 11 that much. So they said, let's play this game. And I just blindly bet all my money on 7. I said, mathematically, this will bring me the most in the long run. I might lose this time, but if I play the same thing 5 times, I'm going to make my money. And I did. I outperformed other people who bet with information, because like throughout the game, you don't have to bet at the beginning. Throughout the game, you play and the horses go forward. And then all of a sudden you see like number 11 is almost about to cross the finish line. Right? And then you can bet on number 11. But others are betting, the slots are going to be filled. So mathematics, right? So the thing is to be aware of what your machinery is doing and being able to be smart enough to understand that you can go against it. I really lost track of my thought. What were we talking about?
We were talking about ADHD, actually. That's
exactly. That's why I see going on tangents is another aspect of ADHD.
But thank you. Let me just finish this book with the inclusion, with the conclusion, which I believe very nicely he concluded the book. He concluded the book with the many definitions that are out there for attention, with the one that he mentions it in the book, and is the one by James Williams, the former Google strategist, who is not working for Google anymore and has just away from all these strategies that they are designed for Google. But he talks about attention, and he defines attention in 3 levels. He says the first level of the attention is the spotlight. This is when you focus on immediate actions like walking to the kitchen and make a coffee. It's a spotlight because your focus is narrowed down on a specific short time, near time action. If your spotlight is distracted, you are going to be prevented of carrying out near-term actions like this. Like, I think it happened to all of us. We are walking to kitchen to take the Diet Coke out of the refrigerator, but then suddenly we receive the WhatsApp notification. We look at our phone. We are standing in front of the refrigerator door open. We look back into the refrigerator and we're like, what am I doing here? Why did I come to the refrigerator? So he calls it the spotlight. But then the level after that, he calls it the starlight level attention. And he says, this is the focus you can apply to your longer term goal. Writing a book, set up a business, being a good parent. It is called starlight because when you are lost in the desert, you look to the stars to find your direction. So these are the long-term goals that you have for your life, like being a good parent, starting a business. So these are those attentions being given to those goals, long-term goals. But then he says there is another level of attention, which he calls it daylight. And he says, this is the form of attention that helps you to remember what your long-term goals are there and why they are there in the first place. How do you know you want to write a book? How do you know you want to start a business? How do you know what does it mean to be a good parent? And he calls it daylight because it's only when your life is filled with daylight that you can see these very big starlights and spotlights. So if you do not have the daylight, you actually cannot have your attention towards the spotlight or the starlight. And then he says, losing your daylight is the deepest form of distraction. And you may even being decoherent. This is when you stop making sense to your own self because you do not have the headspace to create the story about yourself when you lose your daylight. And then the writer asks him, so which of these lights do you think in our today's life we are missing that it causes this attention deprivation and this stolen focus from us? As I believe that we are losing our light altogether.
Damn.
So that was very interesting way of looking at attention and how the analogy is put together. I really enjoyed it. The book was a nice book to read. I was not expecting for any advice. I do not consider myself a person who is terribly attention deprived, but of course I do want to pay attention more when I am doing something. The other day I was telling, I think Devran, that or Shahab, I don't know, I downloaded this app on my phone to write daily journals. The name of the app is Stoic. And I was about to pay, but then I said maybe I use it for a couple of days. The next day that I started using it, it popped up a message over it saying that this is the week to be aware about ADHD. Do you want to know about ADHD? And I said, no, thank you. And I said, no, and I closed the pop-up. I was going to open the last night journal that I wrote to write today's journal. And then just in a matter of seconds after the previous pop-up, another pop-up came out and saying that, do you want to? I was like, dude, just 2 minutes, 20 seconds ago, you were telling me this is the week to increase awareness about ADHD. You are just distracting me. You're supposed to be the Stoic app. Why are you constantly sending me notification? So that's very weird. I mean, under the banner of Stoicism, under the banner of focus, under the banner of meditation, all of these distractions are being sold to us at all time.
Exactly.
So that was a good book. That was a good.
In their eyes, they're doing a good thing by using these tools to keep your attention on this issue. Now, my problem with this explanation that Shahbaz provided is, who are you or who am I to decide what's best for other people? I'm saying, like, we're making that judgment call, and then we're using the system to promote our product, whatever it is, or our message. But then I'm deciding that it's good for you. And then I don't know if you will be happy with me deciding that for you. So there is a bit of an issue there. It's an overall a very interesting kind of ethical conundrum to explore.
Yeah.
But I
But
don't
yeah,
even think that's ethical, to be honest. Like when you think about it, like what's good for me doesn't necessarily have to be good for other people.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
we would just be one type of person. I mean,
However, in your actions, when you're doing something that's good for you to an extent that you can, you're trying to make the kind of decisions that don't harm other people, right? So if you know that this action that's good for
course.
you is going to hurt somebody else, I don't know if you'll go ahead with that, right? Unless the odds are like significantly in your favor, or whatever. But you're constantly making those judgment calls. So I don't think anybody even bothers with making that little conversations with themselves when they say, I'm going to use the algorithm to promote my things, whatever those things are, whether it's a horrible political message, whether it's a, conspiracy theory, whether it's a healthy practice, jiu-jitsu or whatever. But nobody stops for a second to think that I'm actually distracted, like Kia just said. The app itself distracts you from what this app wants you to do. And then it becomes a bit of a like, what is going on? But, when we are reaching out, or when I'm writing an article, when you're posting a video or whatever, we are also tapping into somebody else's attention. Now, our belief is strongly that that attention is spent to something good, but it's still us kind of almost making that judgment, hoping that the person at the other end will have the, agency to decide for themselves. But the manipulative mechanism still functions. Anyway, we don't need to get in that rabbit.
Yeah, sure. Devon, do you want to go ahead and continue with your book?
But I could, or anybody else can go for the second book. What do you guys want?
I would for either you or Elmar.
Elmar, do you want to go, or
I don't.
would you like to go with a less pragmatic book?
A less pragmatic book.
Hey man, don't say that.
Is that what you mean? Yours is less pragmatic?
Yes,
Really?
less pragmatic.
No, actually,
Of course, mine is more spiritual.
Okay. Interestingly, mine is actually. I didn't expect, but it's like it's a scientific / spiritual, but that's why it's fascinating. And of all the other books that I can give you a million reasons why you all should read, this one is just, I don't know. So, okay, let me try to do this very quickly. I'll try to keep this brief.
I manipulated Elmar to talking. So
that is not very difficult. So
exactly, my point exactly.
So the book's subtitle is The Science of Everyday Wonder and How It Can Transform Your Life. First of all, I wish this author had more of a platform, because the things that he puts in this book are the kind of things that are no weaker than what Jonathan Haidt talks about, or what Jordan Peterson first caught our attention with, or any of the speakers that we see online. I don't think we see this guy online nearly enough. Instead of all the idiots that we see constantly yapping in all the talk shows where they promote their shit. But this book and this author has not received anywhere near the attention that they deserve. So the point is, he explores the experience of awe, how it really affects our emotions and mental health. Draws on a lot of specific studies. That's what I found very fascinating, because usually gurus just talk. You should do what I say. Why? There's a very little science behind it. This one, he doesn't just preach. He has, with his team, engaged in a series of studies. He refers to studies he has not conducted, other scientists have, across different cultures, across geography, to demonstrate that awe is universal. And there's a very specific way in which it impacts it. First of all, let me read out the definition of awe. A feeling of being in the presence of something vast that transcends one's current understanding of the world. So, and we find it in different places. So the 8 places where the research suggests that we can find it are, number 1, strength, courage, and kindness of others. So extraordinary virtue. When you see somebody else basically implement an act of moral beauty, character, strength, ability, virtue, that really impresses us. It could be a skill, but it could be also the kindness. It could be action of helping somebody, or it could be act of heroism, but that can give us a sense of awe. Collective movement in unison, like in dance or in sports. Like think about being among a massive team of fans when your team wins, or in part of the team that wins, or in a big dance event together, like you get lost in that whole action. It could be nature, which what we talked about. It could be music. It could be art and visual design. It could be mystical encounters. It could be something religious or non-religious. It could be something spiritual. Encountering life and death, or birth of a child, death of a loved one. And it doesn't have to be a negative event. The death, if handled properly, it could be a transformative and powerful and awe-striking event in itself. And then, big ideas, like an epiphany of an idea that kind of suddenly hits you when you read something or you realize something. Now, interestingly, what studies suggest is not on the list. Money is not. Consumer products are not. Status signaling is not. And that's the valuable lesson. So these have lasting impact. Money and consumer products don't have lasting impact. They do have some impact, obviously. They have impact on our happiness and physical health, etc. But when you look at the purpose of awe from an evolutionary perspective, there's a factor of it that kind of brings us together with other people, which is obviously evolutionarily very important. It helps us handle threats and the unknown. So the experience kind of brings us joy, allows us to enjoy the present, find meaning and community, healthier. It also affects health. Like that's another section of the book that explains how and in what ways it affects our physical health, apparently. So interestingly, I was very surprised to find out that apparently we experience awe a couple of times a week. So it's not a rare occurrence, although modern life has decreased the amount of awe compared to before. Obviously, science also has done its part, where something that would give you a sense of awe, now you understand the scientific explanation behind it. So it's no longer as impressive as it used to be in the past. But some of the conclusions when he analyzes what awe is and how it affects life, very interestingly, I was fascinated by this, of how many things align with Stoicism. I'm like, how is it possible that these dudes from 2,000 years ago actually figured some of this stuff out? Like, for example, the experience of awe makes us feel small, insignificant, right? This can be therapeutic because it gets us out of our own head and troubles and anxieties, and then forces us to look at the wider context. And this really works as perfectly as possible with the Stoicism, because every concept in Stoicism is about looking at things from afar. There's, for example, a very important cognitive behavioral therapy concept, which is directly derived from Stoicism. It's called looking at your problems in third person. Even Peter Attia talks about it when he was handling this extreme rage that he carried throughout his life. And the first advice that he was given is, think about how, if what you're experiencing, talk to yourself as if you were talking to a friend of yours. Remember also Jordan Peterson's advice. Think of yourself as somebody you're responsible for helping. And so this third person perspective is essential in basically creating some distance between you and your troubles and anxieties, right? Now, this goes a step beyond, and it allows you to look at things in a bigger context. So that's that. Then the other thing is how awe explains and demonstrates to us practically how we are alone are not in control of things, how things are bigger than us, how, parts of the brain that are responsible for the excess of ego, anxiety, even depression, quiet down when we experience awe. So that was to go to the point of narcissism that you mentioned. Basically, ego is murdered by awe. That's incredible. So then the exercises that Stoics have about the power of nature, power of vast forces, historical events, time, that tell us how little we actually control, directly affect this. So when you read Ego is the Enemy, you'll see the exercises or the concepts discussed there, for example, are specifically some of the same things that we're discussing here, to really look around and recognize all around us, even in small things. As our sense of self diminishes, thanks to awe, we recognize that we're part of the bigger thing. And again, this goes in line with the Stoic concept of sympatheia, which is we are part of a bigger thing, right? So there could be family, community, culture, the whole humanity, ecosystem, whatever. And everything in the universe is interconnected, which is why when something bad happens to you, you remember what you said, don't, what was it? One of the rules, you said it, Devan, don't take anything personally, right? So when you see something negative done, it is because that's how the whole system functions. And then you stop seeing every little thing as a jab at you specifically by that evil person who wants to hurt you. You just start seeing it as part of the bigger thing. Or as Marcus Aurelius in the 5th book of Meditation starts is, every day you wake up, remind yourself that you're going to see lazy, incompetent, evil, mediocre people in your life every day. And this is a Roman emperor talking. He doesn't give a fuck. He could just spat them like flies, but he reminds himself to be patient with every type of a person in his life. Now, how all makes us kinder, more creative, intelligent, happier, that was the concept of the book. But I loved about when he talks about the experiences of children. They experienced almost in everything, right? And as your daughter grows kid, you will see that. I saw that with my kids. I mean, every little thing for them is like, oh, like you explain something and they're like this awe. And this could be, the book suggests, a key reason why children are almost always happier than adults. Because we have shut that down in ourselves, because now we think we know the explanation for everything. And therefore, it's useful to look at everything with fresh eyes, to go somewhere new, to travel, to take a walk, to be outdoors, like I go to the flower and observe the bee that is collecting nectar or whatever from it. And just that makes me happier, just sitting next to a tree and observing it for 5 minutes. I mean, there's a reason why meditation practices have to do a lot with observing other things a little bit, right? So it makes us happier. It actually does. Now, straight to recommendations. What should we do to introduce more awe into our lives? We have to be careful with our children. And this was interesting that he starts with that we should make sure that awe does not disappear from their lives. Do you have constantly things that you talk to them about, create chaos, or, walk in nature and open-ended questions and discovery and games and fascinating adventures and stuff. So they carry this into adulthood, because that is what makes them creative, successful, and stronger to handle the adversity that life will throw at them. And all of this applies to adults as well. So we should not, for example, you see something fascinating, there's no rush to label and classify and reducing the phenomena into some, concept. But instead to enjoy. You see a lightning, yeah, we know it's electricity, crackling, whatever, but just watch it and enjoy the show. Like yesterday's snow. We came home and we spent like an hour just looking out of the window, getting out, touching the snow, like kids. These are all the kind of things that you would do as a child. And I think there is beauty in this. And by the way, it doesn't have to be natural phenomena, as I said. Something as impressive as observing somebody perform a jiu-jitsu move in a masterful way. Like, we know, all of us, we derive a lot of pleasure from, and did you see that? Like, that gives us a sense of happiness and bit of gets us out of our own heads. Now, I can't do justice to the book. I am sure I will write a separate article about this. But in terms of how much I could learn from this book, and so the intellectual value of it being one thing, and how much it has an ability to influence us personally and societally, fantastic. So I'm amazed that this guy is not on every podcast, on every talk show, and constantly talking about this concept. So for me, among all the other excellent books, this truly was an eye-opening thing. And because it borders between spiritual and scientific, I was actually surprised that it impacted me so much, because I am really leaning more towards more structured, scientific, very well justified, which is why if this was just a guru book, maybe I wouldn't be impressed. But because it is so based in research and specifically demonstrating how certain things increase or decrease under the influence of awe, that I found this incredibly useful. And here's one last comment. This guy has worked with Paul Ekman. Paul Ekman is a researcher who used to interpret and explain micro expressions. So all of the key emotions that human beings experienced across different cultures, anger, contempt, and so on and so disgust. Apparently, we have in our facial features, I spent some time digging into this years ago, we betray those emotions. You can tell if somebody's lying if you really pay attention in slow-mo to how the person's facial muscles function, because it's very hard for humans to hide certain emotions. And so apparently awe is one of those things. And there's specific facial expressions, specific sounds we make across cultures and across countries and continents that also shows that we are in that moment experiencing awe. So again, it's not a very fat book. It's like 250 pages, give or take. But yeah, so I think that's it.
Amazing. I loved it. And I also had a couple of questions while you were talking about the different parts of the book. I heard about the concept of awe for the first time from Jordan Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, as you said, I had experienced it before, but I didn't know that it has a name as in English as awe. You said that we experience awe, I mean, based on the book, a couple of times during the week, Masur. It's not a very rare thing happening. It's do we need to humble ourselves to experience the awe? You said that it reminds of how insignificant we are. So when these significant things keep happening, do they in one point lose their significance, and along with it the awe moment that they bring to us? Like if you live by the sea, would the sea every day in the morning bring you that awe that it would bring to me, that I see it like once in a year? Do you know what I'm saying?
A nicely made meal can give you a sense of awe. But if you eat the same thing every day, and one reason why parents sometimes are in awe of interactions with their children is because the children change. So if the children were exactly the same age for 10 years in a row, maybe you would no longer experience awe as much as you love your children. You know what I'm saying? So that's why there are so many different, for example, I don't get the sense of awe from observing a painting, or architectural design rarely gives me that feeling, but I do get that a lot from music. I do get that from observing actions of others, particularly high level skill gives me the sense of awe. Nature, right? So I think this is kind of a menu from which for each one of us, some things are more impactful than the others. Like I don't get religious sense of awe, but Jordan Peterson clearly does, right? So all kinds of different people have, due to who they are, the environment they've grown in, they experience awe in different ways. But the fact that we do experience it is undeniable. And I think some things can, if I listen to the same musical piece over and over and over, it will obviously get a little dull. But there is just so much to choose from in life that if you just keep your eyes open and just keep an open mind to explore what is around you, even like I just told you an example, it's just snow, man. We see it every year. It's nothing new. But just seeing it fall, how it gathers, seeing it on the trees, like these kind of little things. And again, it doesn't have to be like, wow, I've never seen that before in my life type of a thing. You know what I'm saying? Let's also not put it as a just.
No, I understand.
It is a
I
sense
understand.
of,
No, I totally understand it.
like you'll see the first time your daughter walks,
when it
you
comes
have that feeling. You know what I'm saying? Not the second time she walks. Maybe the first 10 times you'll see it, but then eventually it'll be just a regular thing. But then it'll be something else. Then it'll be something she says. Then it'll be something she does. You know what I'm saying? Like it will always, there's always that potential. The point is to not be that person that systematically cuts it out of your life.
You know that ancient saying, like, a man can never bathe in the same river twice because the river flows and the man changes? I find experiences like this can always bring you awe, but in a different way.
Yes.
Since we're always changing, the awe, the meaning of the awe changes. Like each time you focus on a different detail, so everything is actually so beautiful when you see it in the moment. I mean, especially nature. I mean, God, when you look at just the sunset, just the mountain, I don't know, just the sky, anything.
It happens
basically,
every
when
day.
you focus on it, each time you see a different detail to it.
And again, you know, you see the sunset is there every day, right? But not every day I will watch the sunset. But there will be an occasion on which I will just linger on it, watch it, and it will give me that sense. Maybe I will be with someone special. Maybe it will be special.
Of course. But what I'm trying to point out is even if you were to look at it every day,
It's a
each
different
day
you.
would give you a different feeling and you could focus on something different. The awe doesn't necessarily have to come from wanting to receive wanting to get to that level, right? The awe would probably happen by itself. That's what I understand from it. It's from being in the moment and actually experiencing.
Yeah, but the way you add that kind of in a more designed way into your life is if you're never spending time in nature, you're taking that out of the equation. If you never listen to music, you're taking that out. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to introduce these things into your life. And
of course, if you're less exposed to something, you're bound to feel more joy out of it when you experience it, obviously. But
so that's, you know, it's not very I don't know, Elmaresque perhaps, but I was very pleasantly surprised. And I have to say that it's kind of, I like that book because it also kind of is a bit of a confirmation on some of the things that I've already been doing in my life that I know bring me joy, and I have those all moments. And then exploring some of the new things in line with what it suggests, and also seeing parallels to Stoicism, and then understanding that there is an actual scientific backing to some of these things and why these things have positive impact. Great book. I am definitely buying a copy for all of you. You can decide not.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Actually, while you were talking about it and saying that all moments are somehow linked to happiness, I was thinking that how much attention is important, that if you are terribly distracted, then you cannot pay attention, then you won't have all moment, then you are not happy. That was
You're doing
very
this, you're not looking around, even if you're walking. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
It's as simple as that.
Interesting. Devon, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we've been here for a while, everyone, but if you're all okay, my book is not going to take too long, and it's very actually linked to what Elmar actually said. So maybe we can continue and wrap this up all together. What do you guys think? The book I want to talk about was the No Death, No Fear by Thich Nhat Hanh. And it puts the meaning of sympatheia in a different, it explains sympatheia in a different form, actually. So the general concept of what we have of life is what we're born, and we live, and then we die, And then in relation to whatever belief system you have, you're basically ash, dust, or your atoms remain, your energy remains, or you tend to go to heaven, hell, whatever. Now, what Thich Nhat Hanh says is basically there is no birth and there is no death, because we've all always existed, and we've always not existed in the concept that we understand. So let me put it like this. That's why I actually use the word sympatheia, that we're all linked together. It's not just the humans that are linked together from the understanding that we have, but I believe the Stoics actually were mentioning this as well, is that every single thing in the ecosystem, in the universe, it actually works in combination in relation to each other. So when you think about it in depth, just a single grain of rice, how it becomes to be. There's the water, the wind, the bugs, the earth, the temperature, the humidity. Everything goes into that. The person who picks it, the person who cooks it, every single thing that goes into it, from the seed for it to blossom, for it to become rice, for it to become food on our table, and then back in the ecosystem, right after it's basically consumed and everything. So when you think about it, a single grain of rice even has so many contributors for it to be able to express itself. And instead of birth and death, what Thich Nhat Hanh explains is that there is a form of expression when let me rephrase that, when the necessities all align for that certain thing to express itself, then it expresses itself. When the things that are necessary for that to appear dissolve, then that expression also dissolves, but it expresses itself in a different way. So when we die, our bodies deform, but our bodies go into the earth, and it starts to be part of the bigger picture, which is the circle of life, the universe, and then plants are formed, trees are formed, we take part in water. So that made a lot of sense to me. It's basically a more in-depth explanation of the understanding of sympatheia to begin with. And in my mind now, the more I think about it, the more I'm listening to our conversations now, it's like it really humbles you when you think about it. Like every single problem that we tend to think about becomes less important in this concept. And when you understand that your role in life, in the universe, and all this overall concept, right, is so little, and yet also as little as it is, it's still a part of something big, right? So you're significant and insignificant at the same time, and it really relieves your fear of being, right? So birth, death, and being, so expressing yourself and just living, right? I find this book helped me understand that concept a bit more. And obviously it's a very in-depth topic. I might not have been able to explain it entirely. I assume there's much for me to understand about it as well, but I'm still meditating on it. It was a very interesting read overall.
I liked it, and it, in the combination of your talks and Elmar's topic of awe, and the part that I talked about narcissism, I was thinking that how this no death, no fear is washing narcissism off of us.
Yes. Exactly.
And how the same thing, awe and experiencing it, is actually trying to do the same.
Yes.
And how happiness is located where we are not paying attention to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then it reminded me of Jordan Peterson saying that thinking about yourself and feeling miserable are technically the same thing. It also reminded me when Elmar was talking about experiencing awe in community and with others, in others. It reminded me of the concept of the second mountain, David Brooks' book, that it's all about, it's not about like, but you just need to let go of this first.
The ego.
Exactly.
The ego.
He's whatever you want to name it, but just you need to let go of that. You need to stop thinking about yourself.
You know,
That was very
two
interesting.
things I'll say very quickly. One is, again, I keep blabbering about this, but concept of death is a big deal in Stoicism, right? Reflecting about one's own death, reflecting about the part of death in the life. And it is supposed to be something that keeps us grounded. Like you read through the meditations, some of the comments about meditations are usually that it's such a depressing book. Marcus Aurelius was such a doom and gloom kind of a guy. But he is talking about death not because he's a sad person, but because he wants to use that as a constant reminder and as a almost like a thinking tool to just remind himself where he is versus everything else in nature. And then the second thing is that the other concept also from Stoicism, but this really ties in well with what you just said, is Marcus Aurelius never looked at his job as an emperor as a right, as his divine, the assigned role. He looked at it as a public service to everybody else. Seek power, but when he had power, he thought to actually use it for the good of the others. And like I wrote those kind of concepts out and kind of put it in front of me and thought about it several times in the last few weeks, because if I am selected for this job that I applied for, it will put me for the first time in a top position in an office. And so I wanted to constantly remind myself that that's not a honor, or that's not something that I'm owed. That's not a recognition of how amazing I am, but it's an opportunity for me to serve the community. Whether you talk about the refugees, whether you talk about the staff or the organization, but it's an opportunity to do some good. And looking at that as a public service, like something I will do for others, as opposed to what I will get myself from it, is basically the Stoicism tries to put you the action aspect of the philosophy. It's not just accept all the shit that happens to you and be okay with it. No, it's do affect change, but understand that you're affecting the change not for your own good, but for the good of everybody. And the concept of sympatheia then ties with all of this, because you are supposed to serve the community. That's what everybody's supposed to do. Not everybody does, but if you are in a position of power, it's good to remind yourself that, number one, you're not that special. You're just there due to circumstances, so do some good. And number two, the death as a reminder in the back of your mind constantly. Not so you fear it every day, but so you understand that whatever amazing shit you do, 100 years from now, nobody's going to care, right? And so he even mentions, think of this emperor and that emperor and that emperor, all of these people who had the pinnacle of power. Where are they now? Where are all those armies and battles and generals and parties and whatever, right? That's why Meditations is an amazing and timeless book. It's because he didn't intend to pass that message to other people. That was his own self-thought analysis, his own self-therapy process that we are basically privileged to be able to look into. And both of those concepts, the public service as what you're supposed to do in a position of power, and the concept of death and its importance ties in there with what you were just explaining. The interesting thing is that the death as a concept, it goes beyond Stoicism. In almost every philosophy, in every religion, death is always omnipresent, always a reminder out there. The book Comfort Crisis also talks about that, but I'm not going to go into detail. So the concept is essential.
I find this general concept of everything and every being linked to each other is also very helpful in not just humbling the ego, but also to better understanding others. and when you talk about Marcus Aurelius reminding himself of being patient with others, in that same concept, since we're all a part of each other and there's a little bit of us in everybody,
There.
just like there's a little bit of everybody in us, the more I think about it, the more all of these philosophies, all of these thought patterns have very, very common analogies, I think is the proper word, but rephrased in a different way. So they use different terms, but I think it was Jung who was phrasing that. I lost the trail of thought. My bad. Anyway, yeah. So it makes us more humble, and it makes us more understanding towards other people as well. In that sense, so I find it benefited me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, very interesting. I believe so. I mean, yeah, just thinking in that way can be very humbling. Can also make you feel relaxed, not
Exactly.
taking everything personally,
Mhm.
and
not beating yourself about it too.
yeah,
Like
right.
when you make a mistake, right? So
Yeah, but I
those.
also love that notion of there is a little bit of everybody in your personality, character, being, and there is also you in others. So that's a very common and collective notion of being, whatever it
No,
is. I really like that.
there is a concept that Marcus Aurelius also mentions in Meditations. It's be strict with yourself in terms of what you expect you to
Patient with others.
be patient with others. And again, if you look at the list of the kind of people that he had forgiven, the army and the general that rebelled against him when he was on the front line fighting somebody else, like any other emperor would have gotten all of them executed. He insisted on every person who supported that being treated kindly, being forgiven, and was pissed when some of his men would take justice into their hands, go after them. He would then go up to them and say, I forbid you from the... Again, it's again, for us, this kind of example of forgiveness and kindness in the 21st century may not look so shocking, but if you take yourself to 2,000 years ago, to the time when chopping people's heads off was the norm, and then you discover this person who became an emperor and was able to deliver like that, you understand that he could not have done that without the upbringing and the philosophy and the tools that he was given to handle all the problems he had to face. And then we need precisely that. We need the kind of tools, and we need to be educated and trained on how to use those tools for today.
He was probably a very aware person, to be fair. Like judgment and execution comes from a hierarchical position, from a higher position, right? So when you judge somebody and when you point out their mistakes and tend to inflict upon them some kind of justice or whatever the end result might be, then you're looking at them from a higher position, right? But when you tend to understand that they're just another person in different circumstances and possibly made wrong choices, yes, that doesn't change the fact about what they did, but it is very possible for any of us to be in that same position, right, where if we would have lived that same life, right? So it's very easy to judge people looking very shortly in history, like from the Second World War, like how did people do that, etc. I mean, maybe we would have done the same if we had lived that life.
So
You can never know, and it's impossible to know if you're not born and raised in that specific environment. None of our lives are the same, or for that even similar. So when we tend to judge and execute people in that sense, it's I find that a bit impulsive. I think that there needs to be a bit more. Sorry?
There is a book. It's called The Ordinary Men by Browning. It describes ordinary police units in Germany and how it progressively got involved in the Nazi crimes. And these are just regular people now. And then through...
It was suggested with Jordan Peterson also.
Yes. It's a
Really? Ordinary men.
Ordinary Man
Mm.
by Christopher. Not sure about the first name.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, guys. That was amazing. It took a good time to talk about this, but I really enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So
Thank you, sir.
Shab's book will be on the next episode.
Let's do that. I mean, at least we can contribute more to that also. We can have it in an hour and a half episode, and we can talk more.
About different topics then.
Yes, at the same time.
Maybe about...
Shall we set
you-
the...
No, I was going to say that for the next one, we discuss Shab's choice of a book. And perhaps also it would not be a bad idea to say, what are the 3 books you're planning to read next year and why?
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be
Because,
interesting.
if we have
Yeah,
decided to read something,
course.
it is probably because we think it is good. We may discover it's not good.
There is a story behind. Yeah, sure.
Influence is definitely on my number 1 list.
Would it?
Influence.
Influence. Yeah, sure.
Not on mine.
Yeah, you all will enjoy it. It's a very well written.
It's not on Elmar.
Elmar has probably
I have
already
the
read
book.
it. He just doesn't want
No,
to admit it.
I have the book,
Mr.
but I'm
Machiavelli.
not putting it on my list yet. So I agree it's a good book.
Yeah,
It-
you need it the least out of all of us.
I mean, it's a fat book. And I thought, I'll get to it. It's like this.
Thank you
Well,
very
It's
much.
bite sized though. Like the chapters are very bite sized, and the explanation, the language, it's just a very enjoyable read in general.
Interesting.
All right.
Take care,
Thank you.
gentlemen.
And have a great night.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Evening. Bye-bye.